I can't understand this on any level. Okay, let's figure this out. My name is Sean O'Connell. I'm the managing director here at CinemaBlend, and I am the resident Spider-Man fan. Lifelong Spider-Man fan. Love the comics, love the character, love everything that's happening in the MCU. It appears this is all falling apart at the seams. Let's dive into what happened today and what it might mean for the character going forward. Before we do that, do me a favor. Hit subscribe and turn on your notifications. We are breaking news like this all the time on our YouTube channel, and we want to make sure you guys don't miss a single video. So the news hits the wire late this afternoon that Kevin Feige will not be producing the next few chapters in Sony's installments of the Spider-Man franchise. For people who do not know, Sony has the rights to Spider-Man as a character and for years tried to make their own Spider-Man films. It led to 3 Tobey Maguire movies and 2 Andrew Garfield films that were not well received by critics or fans. In an effort to help boost Spider-Man creatively, Sony partnered with Marvel Studios and allowed Spider-Man to go over to the burgeoning Marvel Cinematic Universe. Ever since then, Spider-Man has been able to play in the MCU, showing up in the 2 latest Avengers films, and of course having his 2 solo films, Homecoming, which predominantly featured Iron Man and had a Captain America cameo, and Far From Home, which predominantly featured Samuel L. Jackson and Cobie Smulders' Maria Hill. From what we now understand, that deal is coming to an abrupt end. There were a lot of negotiations about where the 2 studios were going to go in terms of sharing Spider-Man, and the initial deal, which had Marvel helping to produce, especially creatively with Kevin Feige and all of the brain children at Marvel, but Sony making the majority of the money. Marvel would get 5% of some of those opening grosses for Spider-Man. They would take some money off of the top, but most of the grosses went to Sony. It was a lucrative deal for Sony, but of course they had the rights to the character and they were sharing him over to the MCU where Kevin Feige and all of us fans thought that he belonged. Now, according to the report that's coming out by Deadline, which is breaking this news, the new deal had Disney asking for more of a 50-50 split of the revenue. Creatively, you would assume that that's a good deal. Everything that Marvel has done to help boost Spider-Man over the past few years has reset the character and put him on the right trajectory. And yes, Sony was getting more money financially, but when they tried to do this on their own, it didn't work. They really did need Marvel's creativity to get Spider-Man back to a place where he was beloved as a character, and it showed in Spider-Man Far From Home, which is not only the highest grossing Spider-Man film in the entire franchise, it recently became the highest grossing live-action film for Sony in general, beating James Bond's Skyfall. So the takeaway for Sony means that they think they can now make Spider-Man movies on their own. And I kind of understand why they think they can do that. Like, they put out a Venom film, and they didn't have any connection to the Spider-Man universe. They just launched Tom Hardy and the symbiote, and that movie made a lot of money. And again, was not well received. Much like the Andrew Garfield films, not well received. But Sony's feeling pretty confident about themselves. They make a Venom film, it makes a lot of money. They launch Morbius, which is also part of this Spider-Man universe. But people were always wondering, how are you going to bring Tom Holland back over and allow him to potentially interact with those characters? Well, the answer seems to be, we're going to break ties with Marvel and take Tom Holland back and just use him in Sony films. From what I understand, in this new agreement, or lack of an agreement, Tom Holland is still going to be Spider-Man. In the Deadline story, they say that sources tell them that there were 2 Spider-Man movies in the pipeline that are expected to be directed by John Watts, who directed Homecoming and Far From Home, so he would stay on board for 2 more Spider-Man films, and that Tom Holland is still playing Spider-Man. But what you will lose is the ability to have Spider-Man show up in the MCU. So no more crossovers, meaning that you're not going to get Spider-Man ever teaming up with the X-Men as they get introduced into the MCU. You will never see Spider-Man on screen with the Fantastic Four if this agreement continues to be broken from this point that we're at. You will not see a Doctor Strange and Spider-Man film. Spider-Man will go back over to Sony, where he will only play with the characters that exist in the Spider-Man universe, meaning Venom, Morbius, who we're going to meet, and potentially some other characters who they've talked about bringing over, people like Black Cat and Silver Sable. Personally speaking, I think this is a disaster. And I hate to use the word disaster because that just seems really extreme. But we've lived through Spider-Man movies that don't have connections to the MCU. The MCU is at its most successful right now. We're coming off of Avengers Endgame, where we got to see all of the characters that we love from the Marvel Cinematic Universe and from the Marvel Comics playing together on screen and making Spider-Man part of those movies, and this environment, this community, was integral to the success of those stories. So to take him out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and to just isolate him back over on Sony Island is a huge, huge mistake for both Sony and for Marvel, to the point where I believe that they're going to have to figure out how to compromise on this. This is not a good idea for either studio. Yes, financially, Sony, I understand he's your character and you want to get more benefit from the profits, but you cannot break ties with Marvel. Spider-Man belongs over there. Marvel is now at a point where they are getting their characters back from the Fantastic Four to the X-Men. To lose Spider-Man would be a significant blow to the MCU because they need a leader, a character who is going to be positioned to bring Marvel forward into Phase 4. And some people think it might be Captain Marvel. Some people say that Doctor Strange and Black Panther could sort of carry that mantle. But not having Spider-Man as an option is a huge mistake that these two studios need to come back to the table and realize and settle this somehow, where Spider-Man stays in the MCU. Naturally, these are the rantings of a bona fide Spider-Man fan, and so maybe I'm going a little bit overboard in thinking that this is a disaster for the character and a huge loss for the MCU. I want to hear from you guys. Is this really as bad as I'm making it out to be, or is Spider-Man going to be just fine on his own, probably teaming up with Venom and fighting other characters from his books? Head to the comment section and let me know what you guys think about this breaking news of Spider-Man potentially leaving the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Kevin Feige no longer producing Spider-Man films. Good idea, bad idea, everything will move on as normal. Go to the comments and let us know what you think. And of course, while you're down there, do me a favor, hit subscribe and turn on your notifications, because we're posting videos like this on CinemaBlend's YouTube page all the time, and we want to make sure that you guys see every single one of them.